Do you think if you, let's say you're trying to learn Spanish and you watch Narcos and you watch it without any subtitles, just pure Spanish or anything, you change it to pure Spanish, maybe you're watching Money Heist, which is from Spain. Can that help or that's just a complete waste of time? You're better off communicating.
So it's not a complete waste of time, but the problem is I made this mistake. I was
Mm,
sitting my C2 exam in German. This is the absolute most difficult, highest level exam. And unfortunately, I failed one section, which meant they didn't give me the diploma. That section was listening comprehension. The reason I failed it was I had the radio on for a half the day, and I would turn the TV on to German shows, and I would think, I am getting so much listening practice that I've got to be getting better at listening. I wasn't getting listening practice. I was getting passive hearing practice, which is not the same thing. Listening and passive hearing are two completely opposite ends of the scale. So having Narcos on is not useful in and of itself. It's having Narcos on and I would say with subtitles, like even at high levels of the language, I still have subtitles, but never in English. I'll have subtitles in Spanish. And that way I can actually see what they're saying. And, if they're speaking quickly, I'll pause it and I'd be like, they just said a word there. I don't know what that word is. I'm going to go search for it and figure it out. Or I'm going to make a
mm,
note and I'm going to talk about that with my teacher. And
mm.
and I actually genuinely did this before I went to Mexico in November. I actually binge watched Narcos Mexico. And like, I already speak a very high level of Spanish, but I learned Spanish in Spain. So I had very little understanding or exposure to Mexican Spanish. And
Mhm.
I started seeing so much terminology from them speaking it in this show. And that helped me tremendously. But the difference was I already had a high level, so it was something I could just enjoy by relaxing at the end of my day. Beginners will find it a lot harder to watch a Netflix show in their target language. There's other things that I do. I would maybe shorter form content is a lot easier to swallow. Some YouTube videos are good because they tend to be just 5 or 10 minutes long. And on top of that, YouTube has that little gear icon you can press and change the speed to be zero 0.5. And that is a huge difference because the one thing you'll find, no matter what language you're learning, is you'll always feel like they speak too quickly. If you're a beginner
Mm.
in the language, they all speak too quickly. So make them speak slower. That's an option you can do on YouTube videos. If you listen to podcasts in your language, then any good podcast player will also let you slow it down a bit. But you also have to be strategic about it. Just having it playing is one thing, but I try to make it a true learning experience where I have a pen and paper and I'm taking notes or I'm
Right.
putting them into Google Doc or something. And it's a genuine, I am actually learning the language, because I know there's that temptation of like, how can I learn the language in the laziest possible way?
Yeah.
Of just have the TV on in the background, have some noise here, and that sounds great.
Yep.
And some people are able to multitask in a way that they get some kind of absorption. But I personally can't do that. I can't do four things at once, one of them being learning the language, and actually get something genuinely useful out of that experience. I have to give it 100% of my attention, and it has to be really like I hear them say something, and what it'd be like, oh, I don't understand that, shrug it off,
Mhm.
pause, and Google. I might spend the next 20 minutes looking up all the different ways this expression is used. And that means it might take me the whole day to watch one episode of a show, but at least I'm actually genuinely having a learning experience from it.
Got it. So you're actually not sitting there and binge watching Narcos. You are there with a pen and paper. You're pausing, going backwards. What's that? What's this? And really dissecting it. For most people that hear that, that doesn't sound too enjoyable. So there is a difference. Like technically, you're studying. You're not really in like consuming entertainment. It's a good point because a lot of people want to do the lazy route and just
Yeah, no,
watch Narcos.
I can have lazy routes, but I accept this does not count as my true language learning time. Like,
Got
I
it.
created separate social media accounts for the languages that I learn. I actually have 14 separate TikTok accounts and 14 separate Instagram accounts for the various languages I want to switch between. And I will use TikTok and I'll swipe up and just kind of listen to one thing. But I also accept this does not count as my actual language study time. This is fun and enjoyable, and a lot of those are very visual, so it takes a lot of the pressure off. You can still get entertainment value out of it, even if your language level is a bit lower. But it does not count as actual genuine study time that's really going to push my language level up a notch.
Got it. So do it, have fun, but it doesn't count to actually be like uh, an important task in your language learning cadence.
Yeah.
Do it, awesome, but you know, don't expect you're going to be fluent in 3 months just by watching Narcos Mexico. Understood. All right, that definitely helps out a lot of people and clears up a lot. Now you said a couple things. So the one thing with the dialect, you learned Spain Spanish, and then when you were going to Mexico, it's virtually a different language, but you have the basis of it. Like Argentinian Spanish, I've heard people from Argentina, they're like, man, listen, if you go to Mexico, like I speak Spanish. I'm from Argentina. I can barely understand what they're saying. I can put stuff together and it's a choppy sentence. So it's also important, and obviously in India with Hindi, there's a lot of different dialects. Arabic, tons of different dialects. Chinese, a bunch of different dialects. Be patient with that. What would be your 2 cents on languages that have multiple dialects?
I think there's a temptation to take that a bit too far. I think with Spanish, the idea of I couldn't even follow people. No. That's a very specific context. Like maybe, yeah, there are scenes from Narcos Mexico that I had to look up several different words because they were going super deep on their Mexican slang. But for the most part, if you speak any one dialect of a Western language, you're fine. This is another nice to have thing, that it's the same that you and I could communicate absolutely fine, even though I speak Irish English. And if you use a word that I don't know, that's one word out of the whole conversation that maybe I have to look into. And it doesn't, like, I could over exaggerate and only use like the most obscure Irish English words to confuse you, but that's not a realistic situation. Now, having said that, Arabic is different because it's kind of for complicated religious and political reasons that they call it dialects. But realistically, the dialects of Arabic are just as different as European languages are different, if not more so in many cases.
Wow.
And then with Chinese, again, the dialects like Cantonese and Mandarin are completely unintelligible. Like there's some words you'll recognize, but they are for all intents and purposes completely different languages. So that's more of a like, how is the word dialect used in different languages? But for anybody learning most Western languages, I wouldn't worry about dialects too much. Yes, they exist, and yes, there was a bit of an extra stuff I had to do when I moved from Spain to Argentina. There was absolutely new words and new ways they used the language. But for the most part, it wasn't really that big a deal. The fact that I spoke fluent Spanish meant that I could live my life very, very quickly and easily. And it was just a little bit of extra work to make some minor adjustments.
Got it. So yeah, it's basically similar to if you're from Mississippi or Alabama and you have a Southern accent and you're talking to someone from Great Britain. Yes, we're still speaking English. We sound different, but we can still understand. And I might say a slang word from Mississippi. You might say a slang word from London, but we're still getting the gist of it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And you said something very important because a lot of people learn sentences, they learn sequences, they learn vocab, but listening is a big deal. And I feel like a lot of people crumble when they start speaking to someone and then a native speaker will speak back and they're like, whoa, I know my set phrases, but I don't understand what you're saying to me. And now I'm confused. And now the pressure, I'm starting to sweat. What would be your best tactics for increasing listening skills and actually understanding and comprehending what a native speaker is saying to you? Because I believe a lot of the times we focus on speaking, but not listening.
So listening is obviously just as important for conversations at the beginning. But what I would say is, again, the main issue I see here with people is a bit of perfectionism. That when someone speaks back to you, you are never going to understand everything as an absolute beginner. And you're rarely going to catch an entire sentence until you've got enough momentum in the language. So I, again, accept I'm not going to understand everything said back to me. So what I try to do instead is I try to see, are there key words that I can understand? And can I extrapolate the meaning from those keywords? So if somebody says to me, Benny, blah, 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 dinner, blah, 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 tomorrow, then, all the other words they said, I just didn't catch. But I caught that dinner tomorrow. So it would be reasonable for me to maybe guess that they might be inviting me to eat dinner with them tomorrow. And I might follow the conversation in that thread. And maybe I'm wrong. And maybe they're telling me they're having a private dinner tomorrow and I'm not actually invited. But if I make that mistake, the earth doesn't open up and swallow me whole and send me straight to hell. There's not this giant consequence, It's just like, oops, I didn't understand what they said and I've learned a lesson, and conversation goes on anyway. So you have to guess. And that's the thing about listening comprehension. There has to be this acceptance that you have to make your best reasonable guess when you're trying very hard to understand individual words. Because if you start kicking yourself that I didn't understand what they just said to me because the whole sentence was incomprehensible to you, then tough luck. That's just a natural part of the process. Whole sentences are not what you're worried about right now. Try to worry about those individual words. And then what I do to try to train that is I will, again, like I said before, I'll slow things down. I'll make sure if I am listening to things that there's some form of a transcript that I have available to me so I can associate the written form to the sounds. Because with the likes of European languages, sometimes we can see something written down and understand it immediately because of common vocabulary and whatever. But if you hear those same words spoken out loud, you've no idea what they said, even if it's literally written the exact same in English, because they put their language pronunciations on it. Whereas if you see that connection, so I do try to make that connection and have as much material with transcripts as I possibly can and try to build up. I would never like turn on the TV and watch the news in the language without subtitles or anything, because they're speaking quickly. It's way out of my depth. I would try to find something maybe that I've already seen. Like in Spain, I didn't have the any streaming videos when I was in Spain in 2003, but I did have Spanish TV, and I put on Los Simpson. And The Simpsons, I already saw these episodes, so I relied on the subtitles even less, and I already knew what was going to happen. So that meant I could put even more of my energy into just learning what they were saying rather than trying to enjoy the episode or something. And it's the kind of thing that with time, you just accept that at the very start, you understand next to nothing and you just suck a little less every day.